you. I almost said good morning. Good afternoon. My name is Kendall Holcomb. I'm the Public Information Officer for the Nevada Resilience Project. It's nice to meet all of you. I am going to stand back. I am fully vaccinated, but I'm keeping a mask off so you can actually hear me as I talk. Otherwise, I would kind of sound like the teacher in the Peanuts cartoon. This is Veronica Portillo Bradford. She is one of our crisis counseling supervisors. She's actually visiting from Clark County. She's going to do our wellness webinar today. She is our specialist in that, so she's going to handle that in a few minutes. And then we've got Marina Headwell. She is one of our crisis counselors. We call them resilience ambassadors. She will be here for our Q&A section, all that kind of stuff. We are recording this. We will not record any of you if you ask a question. We definitely want you guys to feel comfortable, feel like you have privacy. Just so you're aware, we're gonna keep the camera up here. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So has anybody heard of us before? Raise your hand if you have. No. Debbie has. Okay. Makes sense.
You can always count on you.
Yes. So the Nevada Resilience Project is actually a FEMA-funded grant. We came about in response specifically to COVID-19, but we are obviously here to address a different thing for your community. But we focus on mental health, stress management, coping skills, really anything that you guys might need to feel healthy mentally and also physically. We know that your community was very much devastated by the Mountain View fire last year. You guys lost 81 structures. I know you've lost friends, buildings, your clinic, and that's traumatic. That is a death, and we recognize that. And so we're here to help however we can. Hopefully you feel like this is helpful. If it's not, we are here also as a one-on-one. So I'm going to hand this off to Veronica. She's going to kickstart, like I said, our wellness webinar, and then we'll kind of just go from there.
Thank you, Kendall.
Hi again, everybody. My name is Veronica Portillo Bradford. Who's familiar with the story of the tortoise and the hare? Most of you guys, right? It was kind of a childhood bedtime story. So most of us have grown up listening to that story, and we know that the tortoise was the one who succeeded, right? Why do we think that is? And feel free to shout out the answer. Perseverance, yeah, absolutely. So, even though he was slow and steady, the actual short-term answer is resilience. He was resilient. Now let's take a look back in history. Thomas Edison, for example, he failed 99 times before he got it right on the 100th try. This is something that we have in common with the tortoise and Thomas Edison. It's resilience. As a human race, we are resilient. And I think that sometimes we forget that. So we are here today to remind you. Thank you. So in short, what is resilience? So I have two definitions on here. The second one, as you can see, is elasticity, but that's not what we're talking about here today. We're talking about the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. If you could. And as Kendall had mentioned, you guys faced a very difficult loss recently. And I want to briefly mention the stages of grief. So before we can get to resiliency, we have to go through these steps, right? So the first and foremost being denial. We don't want to admit what happened has happened. But the truth of the matter is that we eventually have to get to acceptance. So this is a stage that initially can help survive the loss. You might think at this time currently, life's unfair. There's no meaning or things get too overwhelming. And it's a common stage to wonder how life will go at this time. So, sorry, I have to flip my notes here. we're kind of at a state of shock, basically, is when we are in the denial phase. And then we move on to anger. So what I want to briefly mention here is that mental health professionals have actually stated that anger is an essential part of the stage of grief. It's okay to feel angry. You are completely valid to feel that. And honestly, it's encouraged. And I know that that sounds a little bit odd to say, but it's an important step here because you need to accept and feel those feelings. You may be thinking at this time, why me? Why our community? Life's not fair. You might even blame others at this stage. You might lash out at your loved ones, friends and family. You might find it incomprehensible on how something like this could happen to you. And then we move on to our bargaining stage. So bargaining is, if you believe in a higher power, if that's something that you identify with, you might be asking God or whoever to kind of negotiate. I'll do this if you give me this. At this time, we may feel things like guilt. This is a very common thing to feel as well. There's such a thing as survivor's guilt. So survivor's guilt is the continuous mental and emotional stress experienced by someone who has survived an incident in which others did not. And that's a hard thing to face. And then we have our depression phase. Things get really hard here. And I encourage anybody that if things are getting a little bit too overwhelming, too difficult, that you do seek mental professional help. There is no shame in that. And I want to make it very clear that, again, just like anger, you're allowed to feel those feelings in the depression stage. And then lastly, we have acceptance. So acceptance is that feeling that while it's not okay what you went through, it's not easy what you went through, you're beginning to accept the new normal. So while the rest of, you guys have also experienced this with COVID-19, there is a new normal, right? Everybody here is wearing a mask. It's just the new normal. On the flip side of that, you guys are also facing the grief of the fires. And things have changed, right? So eventually we want to get to this acceptance stage, and it's going to look different for everybody. I want to make that very clear, that it's not going to look the same for everybody else. So while somebody might be at the anger stage still, somebody else might be at depression, somebody else could be in bargaining. But what helps is the fact that you have all these people. Well, I want you guys to look to your right, your left. All these people here, you guys have a great support system. And you guys can help each other get through this together. And that goes hand in hand with resiliency as well. So I'm going to stop talking about stages of grief now. But I want to address stress. Because stress is something that we handle during those stages of grief, right? So we're feeling that stress. And it's important to note here that there are different kinds of stress. Stress can look different. So we have mental/cognitive reactions, so the way that we think. We also have our behavioral reactions, so how we interact with each other. And while it says here on the slide, interactions with others, it could also be interactions with yourself. How are you treating yourself right now? Are you being kind to yourself? Are you being really hard on yourself? These are important things to acknowledge. And then emotional reaction. How are you feeling? Are you feeling that sadness? Are you feeling angry? Or maybe you've been experiencing some joy. I know that sounds odd, right? Joy? Why would you feel joy in the middle of a huge incident? But they're not always negative reactions. And then your physical reactions, body aches, pains. Physical symptoms are a huge acknowledgement for stressors. So for me, for example, when I'm stressed, I get headaches like no other. I get stomach aches. So physical reactions, your body aches, pains, are important things to remember during times of stress. If there's ever a time that you're feeling some sort of physical, like you might be sick, think about if there's nothing else going on health-wise. Could it be stress? Right? So wellness. Obviously, we need to cope with the stress, right? We need to get through our stages of grief. And wellness is how we do that. We have to make sure we're taking care of ourselves. So what is wellness exactly? So by definition, it's the optimal health and vitality encompassing all of these different areas of life, different areas of well-being. And we're gonna go over them here shortly. But first and foremost, it's just taking care of your overall self. I know that it's pretty common when we talk about wellness, first thing that really comes to mind sometimes is our physical body. Are we eating healthy? Are we going to the gym? Whatever. But it's mind, body, soul. There are a lot of areas of wellness here. And then it's also understanding your stressors and limitations. What exactly makes you feel stressed? So, however Debbie here feels stressed, somebody else could feel stressed a different way. What might be stressful for her might not be stressful for somebody else. Taking care of ourselves allows us to preserve our overall wellness, increase happiness, and enhance our overall functioning. I'm going to say that again. Engaging in self-care, wellness, helps preserve our overall wellness, increase happiness, and enhance overall functioning. It also helps us reduce stress, and it can assist with our coping skills, how we deal with stress. So if we're engaging in things like self-care on a regular basis, do you think that we might be able to manage our stress a little bit better? Seeing a few head nods. Yeah. It helps us with having a sense of balance in our lives. We feel a little bit more secure. And then lastly, it's a reset button. So it kind of allows us to start fresh on a clean slate. So we've discussed what wellness is, but let's go over what it's not, because there are a lot of misconceptions here. Again, like I said earlier, it's not all about the physical self, right? It's about your mind, your body, your spirit. At the very top there, you see selfish. Something that I hear all too often is, I can't take care of myself. I have little ones. I have other priorities that come first. I just, by a show of hands, who's been on an airplane? I was just on one yesterday. And I clearly remember they said, if, in the event of an emergency, the oxygen mask from the aircraft comes down, you put yours on first before you put on somebody else's, right? It's the same concept with self-care here. And I'm going to reiterate this several times during this presentation, so you might get sick of hearing it from me. But I really, if you take nothing else away from this, take this. You are no good to anybody if you are not taking care of yourself. We have to take care of ourselves. It's not complex. It doesn't have to be expensive, so don't think self-care is a monthly massage subscription. It's not going on a luxury vacation. It could be something as simple as sitting outside and drinking your morning cup of coffee because that's what you enjoy doing. It could be reading a book, going for a walk, talking with a loved one or a close friend, somebody that you trust. So that right there are a ton of examples of things that are not expensive and pretty simple to do, right? It's not one size fits all. So going back to the whole, what looks like stress for somebody else could be very different for somebody else. So that one size fits all, Kendall here really loves to work out. That sounds terrible to me. I hate it. That sounds really stressful, if I'm being perfectly honest. I love to read. That's my idea of self-care. I like to relax. And it's not about adding one more thing to do on your to-do list. I know you guys have a lot going on, and there's a lot of things that you have to do to get back to normal. But adding one more thing to your to-do list, self-care is something that should be implemented into your daily routine. Something that you can easily do, sprinkle 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. You have a morning routine, put it in your morning routine. You have a nighttime routine, do that. Try to at least do one thing for yourself every day, no matter what it is, as long as it's healthy and it's good for you. And it's not something to do only in times of stress. And again, I'm going to reiterate that. So self-care is preventative. So remember how I said earlier that self-care is something that allows us to manage our stress better and increase those coping skills? So engaging in self-care, if we're only doing it when we're stressed out, what's the point, right? We're not able to manage our stress, we're already stressed. So we need to be able to do something for ourselves every single day so that way we can acknowledge that we're feeling stressed. And we know how to cope with it a little bit better. And then lastly, and this is always my favorite part of the presentation. So, self-care is not a reward. It's a necessity. And I want everybody to just repeat that to yourselves. Self-care is a reward. It's not a necessity. Wait, switch that. I tested you guys, haha. I saw a lot of confused looks in the crowd, and yeah, I caught myself. So, self-care is a necessity. It's not a reward. Okay, so I talked about self-care, right? But how do I do it? Well, your self-care routine should include these things here that you see on the screen. So exercise, nutrition, sleep. Are you getting enough hours of sleep? I hear not much. I saw a lot of people shaking their heads. No. Yeah, so sleep is also a very important one. It's great for not only physical body, but mental too, right? Creative endeavors. What are you guys doing to be creative? I always like to mention here, like, unleash your inner child. Be creative, have an imagination, do something fun, have fun. Just because you guys are going through a hard time right now does not mean that you can't have fun. It doesn't mean that you can't be happy. You guys have full permission to do that. Everybody has the right to be happy, right? It's very important. Spiritual activities. So it doesn't have to be necessarily religion. So if somebody doesn't identify with a religion, that's okay. Maybe it's spiritual. It doesn't have to be secular. But if going to church is something that you identify with, go to church. Speak to somebody. Maybe you like to meditate. meditate. And then social support, which it seems like you guys have plenty of that, right? You guys all have this wonderful community. Your community even set this up. The lovely people over here. You guys can wave. They're the ones, you guys are the ones who set this up. So having that social support, talking to a loved one, talking to a close friend, somebody that you care for, somebody that cares for you. Thank you, my dear. So what are some tips to cope and enhance our resiliency? Well, first of all, we need to be aware, right? We need to be aware of how we're feeling. So, communicate with those friends, loved ones, coworkers, even, about your stress. Make sure you're letting people know how you feel. If you're going through a hard time, and you're also supposed to be going to work and doing your daily activities, and your boss is expecting you to do your best, if you're stressed out, are you going to be doing your best? Probably not. Remind yourself that everyone is currently in an unusual situation with limited resources. Not only are you guys going through COVID-19, you guys are also facing the effects of a fire. And I heard that last night was a little bit uneasy for some people with the wind. And it probably brought back a lot of that stress, right? It's an unusual time. But if we remind ourselves that everybody, you're not the only one who's going through this. So you are not alone, is the key takeaway here. And then identify and accept those things which you do not have control over. As much as we want to control the wind or the fires, sometimes we can't. Recognize that you're doing the best that you can do with the resources that you have. I guess it goes hand in hand with be kind to yourself. Be patient with yourself. And I know that that's not something that you hear very often, but it's essential to be kind to yourself and remind yourself that you're doing the best that you can. Secondly, we want to maintain that healthy routine. So that self-care routine, it allows us to have a sense of control, right? So if we are providing ourselves with a daily routine and we stick to that, that's something that you have control over. Now granted, we can't control the weather, but we can control how we react. Make sure that you are blocking out time to eat. You're taking those necessary breaks. Sometimes it's okay to put yourself in timeout, which I have number 4 here, take timeout. Timeout's not just for kids, it's for adults too. I put myself in timeout all the time. Sometimes I get like a really nasty email and I put myself in timeout because I don't want to react to that email being upset. You just gotta take a timeout. Take 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Just take a step back, do something for yourself, and come back to it. And again, enjoy. So enjoy your time. Again, relax, be happy, do something fun. Don't feel like you have to wallow in sadness all the time. You're allowed to feel happy. And if nobody's giving you permission to do that, I'm giving you permission. So be mindful. Be mindful not only of what is going on in your community, what is going on with your loved ones, your neighbors, but what's going on with yourself. Lastly, get help. If things are getting, again, too overwhelming for you, and you are not able to cope, if you are having a very hard time coping, if you're misusing substances, if you are misusing alcohol, if you're having thoughts of suicide, I really encourage you guys to reach out. And I know the second line here sounds like a medication commercial, but continue with your treatment and talk to your provider if you experience new or worsening symptoms. But it's true. If you are currently seeking mental health treatment, if you have an active plan and you are talking to your provider, make sure you are continuing to do that. And then understand that what you are feeling right now is normal during this time. So our resilience ambassadors provide individual and group support. I should remind everybody that she is not a licensed mental health professional. She's not certified, but she's an amazing resilience ambassador, if I do say so myself. She provides that contact and engagement, safety and comfort, stabilization, which is something that's very hard to find, especially after an incident. She provides very important information, resources, connection to social support, information on coping, and our linkage to collaborative services. So I will open it up to questions. Yeah. And I'm gonna turn it over if you have questions for any of us, or if you don't necessarily feel comfortable asking a question out loud, you're more than welcome to come up to Marina or myself. I'll make sure I put a mask on before, but I want you guys to feel comfortable. We are here for you guys. And I really hope that you took something away from today's presentation, so thank you.
Because we're gonna do an experiment real quick. And I hope you trust me. I hope. My husband does, so that's good. I want you guys to close your eyes. Everybody close your eyes, because I don't want anybody to feel judgment. I'm gonna close my eyes too. I want to take a big inhale for 3 seconds, and then I want you to scream. Because, oh yes, we're gonna scream, and it's gonna echo because we're in a gym, but you guys are frustrated, you guys are hurting, and I think that this will be very cathartic. And if I'm the only one screaming, that's okay. So, we're gonna inhale.
Cover your ears if you want.
Cover your ears if you want, and just let it out. Do you guys, okay, you can open your eyes now. Do you guys feel better? Do you feel silly? That's what all of you do. Okay, I'll turn this back on now, so I don't mess with your Okay, so I'm gonna ask you again. Do you guys feel at least a little bit better? A little bit, I see some head nods. See a little body shaking, I like it. So like I said, we're gonna do some questions and answers. You will not be on camera for this part. We're gonna keep it facing this way. If you just wanna raise your hand, if you wanna stand up, whichever you guys feel comfortable with. Again, like Veronica said, if you do not wanna ask a question to the group, we will kind of walk around one-on-one after this. Yeah, so Marina's gonna set up some chairs for the one-on-one real quick, but let's do hand raising. Does anybody have questions?
Yes, I love that you mentioned that. So if anybody didn't hear her, she was saying stages of grief. It can move back and forth. So don't think that it's step 1, step 2, step 3. You guys can bounce back and forth and have full permission to do that. Obviously, we want to get to acceptance, but thank you so much for mentioning that. And I think that's a really great point. It's very important to remember that while not everybody's at the same stage, you guys might be going back and forth a little bit, and that's okay. So I'm going to briefly touch on that, but I also want to make sure that, Marina, you have an opportunity to answer as well. But when there's times of stress, communication breakdowns happen. And I think it's important to remember that self-care, if we're taking care of ourselves, we're able to cope with the stress. It helps ease the stress a little bit. It doesn't by any chance make it go away, but it helps ease that burden. And when we're easing that burden, we're able to communicate more effectively. But it's also very important to remember that the person sitting next to you is also going through what you're going through. So I'm going to turn this over to Marina.
Thanks. To address your question or your comment, I think as Veronica said, everyone's going through this situation at the same time. And all of us have ideas that are ping-ponging at different times. And someone in your family may be feeling relief and joy, and another person may be feeling very sad. And at that point, it becomes kind of like this boundary that gets built. And you don't want to offend the family member in one way to say, I'm really struggling. How can you be happy? Or the person that's happy, how can they connect with you if you're feeling grief? So I think because there are a variety of different emotions, and there's a level of respect there probably, and so things are difficult to say because they don't want to hurt someone by using incorrect words. So I think it's very, one of the skills that we talk about is journaling and writing positive affirmations. And so I think when all of us are struggling with something, whether we have someone next to us or we don't have someone next to us, like Veronica said, taking a time out. If you're having a heated conversation and you don't want to say something that's hurtful, take a pause, but write those feelings down. Get them out. This is how I'm feeling. This is why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. And then when you both are in a good space or in the community, you're feeling like another time to meet together is safe, go over those journal notes and be able to share them in a very mild manner versus the moment of intensity when you were feeling whether sad, happy, joyful. Does that help at all?
I'll repeat the question. So what she was saying was it's difficult to get the words out and express exactly how you're feeling and really getting that out and expressing it and having somebody else understand. So then there's just miscommunication happening. So how do we combat that? How do we resolve that issue? And Marina was talking about journaling. So do you write? Okay. Yeah, I see you're taking notes, so thank you. I saw a lot of people taking notes, so that's wonderful. So I want to recommend to you what I actually did, something that I went through actually as a teenager. And I had a really hard time communicating with my mom. It was one of the hardest times of my life, and we just had these communication breakdowns where I was unable to clearly express what I was going through, and she couldn't understand for the life of her how I was feeling, why I was acting the way I was acting. So what she suggested was to journal, but we wrote letters to each other. And it's something that, we don't do as often as we used to, writing letters to one another. But I would write we had a notebook that we shared. And she just said, write whatever you want. No judgment, no repercussions. You just get it out. And leave it on my bed. You don't even have to give it to me in person if you don't want to. And we would communicate that way for a while. And it actually really helped improve our communication skills because I couldn't get it out through my mouth, but I was able to when I put pen to paper and really clearly define, like, okay, this is what I'm trying to say. And she finally started to understand. And when she understood, our communication was able to be improved. So I hope that's a great suggestion for you. It's something that helped me, so I want to pass that off. And anybody, if you're having any time, whether it's an incident or you're just not communicating just on a normal day, write a letter to one another. So, just to repeat what she had said, so, she said, you know, those negative thoughts, put them on a cloud, put those thoughts on a cloud, and let them float away. And that's a beautiful visual, by the way. I haven't heard that one, so that's wonderful. Do you mind if I steal that? Okay, great, because I'm gonna steal that anyways. Yeah, it's a nice, so when you put like a visual to it, sometimes it helps. Because we think about like those negative thoughts and then we're like, all right, well now what? Like now you're just sitting in the negative feelings. But if you put them somewhere visually in your mind and you release it, that can actually really help, whether you think so or not.
And I'm gonna actually kind of expand on this, because as Veronica said, I work out, that's my thing. Specifically, I do a lot of yoga, but also my husband has broken my spirit down and got me into like doing way more hardcore stuff, which is actually great, but it's really great. But for yoga, what we do when we're at the end of our practice and we're laying there, and it's very similar actually to that concept, is you can absolutely recognize that you're having these thoughts. We're not telling you, oh, it's bad to have these, because of course you guys are going to. You're going to be stressed, you're going to be frustrated, you're going to have survivor's guilt. And that's, as Veronica said, you are entitled to have these feelings. So what we're taught in yoga is, you know, as you're doing your self-care, and you might be sitting on your porch enjoying that cup of coffee, or you might be taking a walk with your dog, who, by the way, are excellent sources for hugs. Recognize that thought. Embrace that thought for a second, feel that thought, and then put it on a cloud and blow it away. But take that step to recognize the feelings that you're having first, because you're allowed to have them, but then blow it away.
And I thank you so much for sharing your resources, because I think that's wonderful. And having that support of one another. And like you were mentioning earlier, you know, checking on one another. It's called mutual responsibility. We are responsible for not only taking care of ourselves, but call your next door neighbor, call a friend, check in on them and make sure that they're doing okay. And you have no idea how impactful it can be to just ask somebody simply, how are you doing?
Thanks for sharing that. I know not only in our community here in the Carson Valley, Mono stretch, but also across the country, especially with the COVID, but I think it really will maybe something that you as a community may want to consider. But it's a positive affirmation project. And as a community, you could come up with a word or a symbol or a phrase, and you can decorate your window with it. You can put it on your front door. And creating that resilience across your community so that everyone knows maybe they can't send a card, or maybe they can't make the phone call, or maybe their hours are different, but they are included in this resilience effort across your community. So when you're driving past someone's house, or you're going to the store, or you see your neighbors, you can kind of decide as a group to collectively come around to begin that healing process. And as Veronica said, and the woman in the back, some did experience, the physical experience, and some didn't. But creating a community of compassion and everyone coming together for this one feeling of uplift may be something you as a community could consider, bonding together. Because you've got a lot of people here, and I'm sure if one person does it, then a couple more people will do it, or someone who's not here will see a sign that says believe, or a heart, or we are strong, we are brave, we are courageous, we can do this. And then the next person, and the next person, and the next person, and that's the resilience piece. That's the bouncing back. So just a thought, as you're saying with the card. I think it's a wonderful idea. But this might be something that's even simpler, that could impact everyone with just a piece of paper and a pen.
There are gonna be days where, something pops up in your head that reminds you of that loss. And it could be insignificant to somebody else, but it could mean the world to that person. So there's definitely gonna be good days and bad days. And one of these days, good will outweigh the bad. Bad days come and go. But there's always a new day, right? So thank you for sharing that.
We really very much appreciate you guys coming in and being open and vulnerable and hearing Veronica and Marina speak. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.